A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us actually on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon. Hope everybody's keeping safe. Thanks a lot again for joining. We're a little bit early today, but I hope that as the session goes on, more and more of you will join on. This, of course, is the ongoing webinar series organized by the Institute of Corporate Directors. Thank you so much to ICDM for helping to arrange all this, not only just this, but actually all the sessions that came before. Before we get started, a little reminder on the housekeeping rules. On your Zoom tab you see below, you will see two tabs. One is for the Q&A and one is for chat. If you have any questions for our wonderful speaker, can you please drop them in on the Q&A tab and we'll actually answer them at the end of his presentation. But if you actually want to leave feedback or chat, or in fact, we've been having some interesting discussions on the chat box among all the attendees, you can then drop it at the chat box and we'll answer them or move them around. But thank you very much for that. And of course, if you have any technical difficulties or you want to talk to the ICDM staff, that's the place to do it. Just a reminder, the session's actually recorded. We'll send you a copy of it after we're done. Of course, if you want to leave the webinar session at any time, you'll be able to do so, and you can rejoin if it is still in progress. Now, before we go on, I think it's very pertinent to say that I think while a lot of us are getting used to working from home, but none of us, I think, are used to the circumstances still that have put us in this position. So as such, I think leadership now more than ever, or at least some kind of guidance more than ever, is very much needed. It is on that note that I welcome Sudhapuri, who's the head of research, Apex Center for Creative in Singapore. His topic today, as you probably guessed, is leadership in times of distress. And may I say that it is during times like this where all our metals, just not just our leaders, but us as well, are tested. But that's enough for me, and I hand it over to Sunil to start.
Hey, thank you, Nadia. And really, my pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon, partnering with ICDM and sharing some of our research to the director community in Malaysia and the region. So as Nadia pointed, my name is Sunil, and I work with an organization called Center for Creative Leadership. If you're not familiar with CCL, we are a top-notch leadership development institute with a very deep and a very strong research backbone. And my job as the head of research is to look around the block, identify trends, research those trends in partnership with other organizations like ICDM, and then share those with the community. So also thanks for giving me a chance to wear my tie and my suit this afternoon. You know, I'm getting used to this world of speaking in front of a virtual audience now that, we are all under the lockdown at this point. So you're all senior executives, and if I were to ask you to close your eyes for a couple of seconds and think about the future, what that will hold for you, your teams, your organization, your board community, and so on, you may wonder that's a moot question. At this point, we are all concerned about the here and now, the pandemic situation, the lockdown that we are in, and so on and so forth. As Nadia pointed, the times are unprecedented. You know, we are living in unprecedented times. Even if your organization has been through SARS in 2002, 2003, or MERS a few years later, or even if your organization has suffered financially during 2008, 2009 financial crisis, these are unprecedented times. You know, it's for the first time post perhaps World War II when the entire world economy has come to a screeching halt. And in these tough times, the onus is on leadership. People like you and me, folks who are sitting on the boards, in the C-suite of the organization, to not only take the situation, stock of the situation here and now, but take our organization forward. Prepare for when the turnaround happens. Please change the slide. So, our situation at this point is like our friend here in the picture who's standing in front, or not standing, surfing, and he or she is encountering a huge tsunami type wave, wondering how fast the wave will be, whether he or she will be able to ride that wave or the wave will take him or her along. If our friend falls down and does not drown and survives to see another day, his or her best bet is to turn around, recenter, rebalance, and get ready for the next wave. This is the kind of situation most of us, you and me, and our organizations are in. We are in a lockdown. We don't know which way the economy will go, which way the situation will go. We just need to make the most of what we are doing at this point and get ready for when the turnaround happens. So we are in serious people situation. You are all C-suite leaders, board leaders. I'm sure you're a part of those dialogues when there are serious people issues in the organization. People are concerned about their jobs. They are concerned about their health, their well-being of their teams, well-being of their families, and so on and so forth. We are in dire straits in terms of the economic situation as well. Companies have started filing for bankruptcy in the West. I think Virgin Atlantic was the first high profile organization to go under. And I'm guessing, unfortunately, we'll see many will follow that path. Also, World Trade Organization says that about 1/3 of the trade will be lost post-pandemic as compared to pre-pandemic numbers. I've picked up some data on the slide on the left from the ICDM recent survey on Malaysian boards and how prepared they are on COVID-19. About 93% of the board directors surveyed in the survey highlight that if this current situation extends for 2 or more months, Malaysia will be in deep recession, or even worse, in a depression for a while or for the time to come. So that's the kind of situation we are in. And not to be surprised, it is leading to serious uncertainty. In fact, more than the pandemic, the uncertainty is killing us, all of us, as we operate in our roles within the organizations. And it is leading to constant stress. And now is the time for us leaders to step up and drive the organizations, not only out of the current mess that we are in, but into success going further. One of the board directors that I interviewed made the comment on the bottom right. He took the metaphor of a badminton game or a tennis game and said that in year 2020 will be a 3-set match between coronavirus or COVID and the world. And COVID has beaten the world in the first set. So it's COVID 1, world 0 in the first set. However, we need to make sure that we come back in the second set if we want to win the match. And the second set, according to the leader, will start as soon as the COVID cases start stabilizing. The curve starts stabilizing and the economy begins to open up. It will be a tough game. And in badminton terms or tennis terms, it will go all the way up to a deuce. But we need to win that second set, or we need to do well in that settlement period when the economy starts opening up. And then going further, we need to beat COVID comprehensively in the third set to take the match away. However, for here and now, we are concerned about our people, we are concerned about our businesses, and so on. However, progressive organizations, rockstar leaders are not stopping at that. If you're a board leader, you're a C-suite leader, an HR executive, business head, you should be thinking far out ahead to attain future fluency going forward post-COVID. Because, all said and done, this situation will end in about 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months, depending on whether you are more pessimistic or more optimistic. It's a virus, it will go away at some point. And we need to be ready for the world post the virus. So I'll be using a term future fluency a few times. Let me share with you what I mean by that. Please change the slide. So if thinking about here and now is making you anxious, that's not a bad situation to be in. You understand that the situation is grave at this point and we need to act. So if you're caught up in that anxiety, I would say you're in the future anxious state. Some of the leaders have already gone past the state of anxiety and they are thinking about the post-COVID world. If you're a board director or a C-suite leader, I'm sure you're a part of those dialogues. Hey, we will get a hit on our top line. Our revenue will come down by 60% or 70% or 50% if you're lucky. What happens after that? So if you are already working towards the hypotheses or towards the strategies that you may need to adopt to take your organization forward post-COVID, I would say you're in the future aware bucket. Future fluent leaders are not only aware about what the future may hold for them, they are not only aware that the world will be different post-COVID, they have also started taking baby steps towards preparing their organization for that second set, as I mentioned in the first slide. Future fluent leaders think differently, feel differently, act differently, learn differently. They almost have their head on the swivel, constantly looking around to identify data sets that are available at this point to take their organization forward. They reflect, they introspect, they discuss, they attend forums like these, and they exchange ideas, and then they start acting on those. Now, with this context of future fluency and within the context of the current COVID situation, let me share with you paradoxes, mindsets, and capabilities that we as leaders must exhibit to take our organization forward. All of this comes from CCL research, and all of the research you can download for free from our website. Please turn the slide and I'll start talking about paradoxes. So I'll share with you 5 paradoxes that, that leaders like you and me should be thinking through. These are dilemmas. These are choices we will have to make in the next couple of months to come out victorious in the second set, however hard that set may be. Please turn the slide and I'll share with you the first paradox. The first paradox is around going slow versus going fast. Now, we may live in extraordinary times at this point, and extraordinary times need extraordinary leaders to take extraordinary actions and fast. However, board directors warn us that in this pressure from the stakeholders, from the boards themselves, the CEOs and the management team may get trigger happy. They may start shooting the wrong things around them and therefore may suffer in the long run. Leaders tell us that CEOs and the C-suite needs to go slow initially. They need to introspect. They need to ask the hard questions. They need to even dig deeper and identify what was the purpose of their organization. Will that purpose be met post-COVID once the revenue falls by 50 or 60%? If not, do they need to tweak something in there? So they need to do some soul searching at this point rather than pulling the gun out and start shooting immediately. Also, they need to identify some potential tripping points. So one tripping point that most organizations faced over the last few weeks is inadequate business continuity planning. It is rather humorous to share that even organizations that have been through SARS, excuse me, organizations that have been through SARS or MERS, even they were not ready for with their BCP plans around a pandemic. Sorry. So these organizations had prepared for earthquakes, they had prepared for wars, they had prepared for shutdowns, but only regional shutdowns. Nobody was prepared for the world coming to a screeching halt. We need to soul search and identify why that happened and what we can do to make sure that our BCPs are stronger coming out of the pandemic. And I'm sure as board leaders, you are being pulled into some of these dialogues. The third element around going slow and taking your time is to understand opportunities at this point. One of the board directors I interviewed in a bank highlighted that this is a good time to shore up your capital. Because there'll be a cash crunch by organizations, they are being pushed and pulled by the clients and the vendor suppliers at this point around cash cycles. There may be some liquidity crunch, and this is a good time to pick up some working capital, get some lines of credit, get some loans going because the capital is cheap. Also, one of the other board directors I interviewed in a healthcare and pharmaceutical industry highlighted that because of the regulatory changes that may happen around drug testing, around vaccines at this point, because of the situation that we are in, healthcare organizations should be ready to make the most of the opportunities that spring up. So organizations and leaders who can draw the right balance between the paradox of going slow and preparing to go fast in a few months will be the ones who will be best positioned to make the most out of the situation. That's the first paradox. Please change the slide. Now, one positive thing coming out of the pandemic is the pace of technology acceleration that has happened over the past few weeks. In fact, one of the board directors said that they have seen 10 years worth of digital disruption happening in the last 10 days. When the circuit breaker happened in Singapore a few weeks ago, India got locked down a couple of weeks ago. Most of Asia, I guess, including Malaysia, is working from home at this point. People are getting latched on to collaboration platforms, communication platforms. They are getting used to being in meetings like we are doing right now. Even public speaking at this point is happening on the camera, like I am getting used to that. And clients and vendors are getting used to a situation where even high value deals are being discussed on camera, whichever organizations are doing that at this point. So there's a huge acceleration in terms of uptake for technology. And this is the time to drive digital transformation, digital disruption. Leaders like you and me must ride on this increased propensity to embrace technology to take this agenda further. However, the risk here is that because employees are working offline or away from the organization premises, they are telecommuting, they are working from home, they may lose connect with the culture of the organization, because you don't meet your friends, you don't meet your boss, you don't meet your teams every day, you don't see them in the office, you don't walk into a reception area that has the office logo or the organization logo. That connect may become loose a little bit. And because people are getting used to this new work style of working from home, dealing with family, dealing with kids and so on, especially women, I would say, in most of Asia, because they are incremental responsibilities, this is a time when also leaders may get disengaged, the teams may get disengaged. The onus is on HR executives. I realize a bunch of you this afternoon are from HR function. The onus lies on you to make sure that high touch and high tech, they not only coexist at this point, but they also thrive together. So that's the second paradox. Please turn the slide. The third one is around cost cutting. And I am sure all of us are in those dialogues, rather unpleasant dialogues around cost cutting at this point. Leadership teams are discussing, how to cut spending and so on and so forth. The board directors I interviewed were unanimous that their organizations will lose between 25 and 75% of their revenue. A lot of them were quite optimistic that even if they lose 50% of the revenue, their organization will survive and live to see another day. And even with the 50% cut, there are serious discretionary costs that need to be cut down. And I'm sure you are a part of those dialogues. Those that conference that we want to sponsor, that may not happen. That travel that we want to make to be at a client event, that may suffer over the next couple of months. That high value hire that you want to make to bring on to the management team, that can be delayed. So non-urgent expenses need to be pushed back. If you are renovating your office, that can wait. If you are moving into a bigger office, even that can wait. Big branding exercise, that expense can wait for a while. Also, since people are getting used to working from home and the managers are getting used to not seeing people around them when they walk into the office, this is also a time to look at the infrastructure costs. Why have 100,000 square feet offices in the central business district in KL, or a CBD in Singapore, or in the main city in New Delhi? What is the need? Why can't we have a smaller office there, and then the rest of the organization can work from another premises on the outskirts? Or better still, people can work from home. So organizations are asking these tough questions. However, in all of this, there are two things to be careful about, to be aware of. Number one, don't cut back on technology investments. In my conversations with board leaders over the past few weeks, I've heard several horror stories around what can go wrong because organizations had not prepared their technology infrastructure for this day. One of the bankers, one of the board directors in the largest bank in Asia, I wouldn't name the bank, but you can guess, shared that because of the loan deferment, there were some changes in the regulatory processes and accounting processes, and their bank's central banking system was not ready for that. So they are in a deep problem at this point, trying to get resources to do some coding at the back end to make those processes happen. Another organization, one of the largest Germany-based engineering company, their business head shared with me that their servers crashed a couple of times in a few weeks ago because 5,000 people on the first day of the lockdown logged into the servers from home. So we must save. We must not pull back on our investments in technology at this point. In fact, these are the investments we should push forward. Maybe not now, but we should prepare to push forward soon thereafter. Also, I know it is very enticing to cut people costs, because if you're a professional organization, if you're a consulting company, if you're an organization where people costs are a big line item, it's very enticing to cut that cost and show short-term profitability. However, board directors, cautioned us against that. If you look at the culture here in this part of the world, it is not like the West. In US, in Europe, it is acceptable to accept the pink slip, go home, start looking for another job. In Asia, the relationship between the organization and the employees is much more emotional. So think hard before you let your talent go, because if you let a senior talent go and you want to hire him or her 1 year down, he may not want to come back because that emotional connect is gone and broken. So be careful about people cost cuts and related cuts. So, while you need to cut the fat, you need to protect the core, you need to protect the muscle. That's the third paradox. Please turn the slide. The fourth paradox is getting the right balance between flexibility and control. The current situation is the biggest experiment in work from home in telecommuting across the globe. People are enjoying working from home. Some people, like me, are also struggling working from home, not used to. But we are getting used to that. And going forward, all of those people may not need to go back to the office if there is an office after 3 months or 6 months and so on. I was interviewing a board leader in Singapore, and she shared that before the lockdown, about 5% of people in Singapore worked from home. 95% went to the office every day, day in and day out. Because of the circuit breaker in the country, which started, I think, earlier this week, about 90% of the people are working from home. And this number may stabilize at about 30% post-COVID. Even that is extremely encouraging. Think about the savings in the local infrastructure costs. Think about the savings because as many people will need less infrastructure in the office and so on. So we need to give that flexibility to our teams, not only because they are worried at this point, but also from an organizational perspective. Go back to the last slide, please. Yeah. Organizations are also reorganizing their structures. They are repurposing their talent, if you will. I was speaking with a leader at one of the largest airlines in Asia, and he shared that a lot of their in-cabin staff, because airlines has been hurt the worst, there's bloodshed in the airline industry. Because this organization or this airlines has lost 90% of their business, they are repurposing a lot of their cabin crew to take over roles as nurses in the healthcare in government hospitals and private hospitals. The nurse role is undergoing a change, and that role may split into two. There may be a clinical nurse, and then there may be a patient management kind of a role within nursing. And a lot of these teams who've been released from, let's say, the cabin crew staff, they can join in the latter aspect or the latter role of a nurse's role, which is about dealing with customers, clients, processes, because the underlying skills are very similar. While we are giving flexibility, it is critical that we set the right accountability with the teams. When they are at home, they need to work from home and not enjoy at home. We need to trust our teams to do that, and we need to make them accountable as well. We also need to take control of one critical element, which is supply chains at this point. Global organizations which have been so proud about demonstrating that they have a global supply chain suffered the most during this period of lockdowns. Because of China closure, a few weeks ago, and now most of the rest of the world is under a lockdown, supply chains have been hit the hardest. So organizations that were perhaps assembling the technology in US, getting manufacturing done in China, the code being written in India, perhaps another component being made in Malaysia, those are the organizations that are in dire straits at this point. Take control of your supply chains. It is likely that the supply chains may become more local. There may be more end-to-end smaller supply chains which are more local with a little bit of redundancy built in. So organizations that are able to get the right balance between what to control and what to give flexibility about will be best positioned for the future. Turn the slide, please. The last paradox is about empathy and tough love. So our employees are worried at this point. We not only need to tell them how to social distance, we need to tell them and teach them how to fear distance themselves. And we need to show that compassion. We need to stand by them, we need to help them, and so on. A lot of high-profile organization CEOs have gone in front of their entire organization and said that there'll be no manpower cost reduction in the next 6 months. People can be safe to hold on to their jobs at least for the next 6 months, so that one part of the worry goes away and they can focus on their life. Also, this is the time to show client compassion. A board leader and a CEO I interviewed in India said that all they are doing at this point is going line by line and calling their clients and asking them if there is a way they can help these clients for free. They are also assuring those clients that they will not stand by the legal language in the contract, and they will bend backwards to help these clients in these difficult times. The board director told me that, this is the best investment of their time at this point when the business is shut. Because if they can build that emotional connect, that connect of trust with the clients, they will be able to bring that business on board fairly quickly post the COVID situation in set 2. However, we also need to push our people a little more, push them to the zone of discomfort, push them to build incremental skills, push them to work hard, do everything to win business for the organization. And also, while we need to be compassionate with clients and vendors, we need to make sure that they understand that we are in it together. If we help them, they also help us, our management teams, our organization a fair bit. And therefore, it's critical to have that balance between empathy and what we call tough love, if you will. Go to the next slide, and I'll start talking about mindset changes. So the last section was about paradoxes. The last section was about dealing with the here and now. When we go to the second set with COVID, we should be prepared to deal with the dilemmas that I shared in the last section. Now, in the next section, I'll be talking about mindset changes. As we think about next 6 months, next 1 year, next 2 years, next 5 years, as an organization in Asia, there is some hardwiring that we need to, or rewiring we need to do in our minds to be prepared to take our organizations further. Asia is and will be the center of the world, if you will. I hope you've seen that already, basis how the West has dealt with COVID and how Asia has dealt with COVID. I think we are much better positioned as compared to the developed West in terms of how we dealt with the COVID, and Asia will continue to be the center of the world. There are 5 mindset rewires we need to do in order to make the most as a company in Asia. Go to the next slide and I'll start sharing the top 5. The first one is around the can and should dilemma. Now, owing to deep contrast on the socio-economic front within Asia, leaders like you and me, leaders in Asia, will need to deal with a lot more dilemmas, a lot more choices as compared to leaders in the West. And we are seeing that already. Choices around people productivity, long-term versus short-term, result of leader actions, revenue growth versus cost containment, shareholder interest versus broader good, and so on and so forth. One dilemma I want to draw your attention to is a can and should dilemma. And that dilemma is around sustainability, around making our organizations ready for the future. For instance, while technology can help us do a few things or a lot of things, should we do all of that in one go? For instance, if you're a manufacturing company, technology enables your organization to automate the entire assembly line in the next 6 months. But should we do that being a developing country? Because a lot of people will lose jobs. It will result in a destabilizing environment or a lack of stability in the community and society. So should I do it? If there are weak regulatory and compliance frameworks around environment, should I make more margins just because I'm saving money on pollution equipment? So I pollute more and make more money. Or if my organization is on a fast spree, can I move forward and leave the society behind? So, these are can and should dilemmas. You can do these, but should you do that? Leaders, board directors, C-suite executives, even middle management in organizations will need to get trained to do the right thing, quote unquote, the right thing that is right for themselves, for their teams, for their organizations, community, society, region, and their country. So the first mindset shift is around dealing with the can and should dilemma. Turn the slide and I'll share the second mindset shifts with you. The second shift is around the dealing with the unknown unknowns. Now, leaders who are future fluent not only worry about the here and now, they are concerned about picking up the black swan events as well, because picking up some of these unknown unknowns or black swan events can give a huge lift to their organizations and their teams and their industries. Now, the jury is still out whether the COVID-19 or the coronavirus that was called at that time, whether that was a black swan event or not. Some say it was, some say it wasn't. My take is that if a leader or an organization was tracking the healthcare data, as early as October, November, December, they should have picked up a spike in pneumonia cases south of China or in Wuhan and or the district around Wuhan. So I don't know how many did that. I mean, I don't know if anybody did that. But if an organization was looking at analogies, if the organization was looking at big data, somebody should have picked it up. In absence of that, it was a black swan event. Now, you may be wondering that unknown are called unknown events because they are hard to figure out. While they are hard to figure out, we can train ourselves and our teams to build some capabilities that can put us in a better situation to catch some of these unknown unknowns. Things like training ourselves and our teams to be more curious, to understand data from different sources, to look at potentially unrelated trends, such as, let's say, COVID-19 cases and malaria cases. There's a lot being written now that there is a trend or there is a correlation between the two. Or let's say as weird as, let's say, car sales and the number of deaths in the country and so on due to COVID. Are there analogies there? We should be looking for such analogies all the time. Who knows, we may catch the next unknown unknowns. Also, the leaders must be inclusive, and they should have the humility, because the leaders must realize that they will not have all the answers by themselves. They need to go out and include more people in discussions to get all the answers. So organizations that are able to catch even one or two of these black swan, so-called black swan, or I would call gray swan events, or unknown unknowns, will be better positioned to deal with the future. That's the second mindset shifts. Move on to the next slide, please. The third shift is looking at East for solutions. Now, increasingly, the solutions to challenges we face in Asia will come from within Asia. See how the COVID situation is playing out again. And my heart goes out to people who've suffered, people who've lost lives, and families who are grieving at this point. But there's a huge difference in how the situation played out in, let's say, France, Italy, Germany, US, UK, versus how it played out, let's say, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in India, in Sri Lanka, and in China, and so on. There's a lot we can learn from countries who are around us. Solution to challenges that we face as organizations and as countries will come from our own backyard increasingly. Organizations and countries who in fewer instances only look at West for best practices will be better positioned. I've highlighted 5 things we must do as leaders, as organizations, to be better positioned to looking at East. Number 1, we should push ourselves and our teams to contribute to thought leadership. Irrespective of what area you are in, what function you are in, think about the top 5 thinkers in that field. And now think about how many of them are Asians. I can bet that if not any, there are only a few Asians in that list. We need to change that. We need to add to the body of knowledge that we are producing in our own field. Number 2, we need to have a realistic narrative around Asia. Our narrative needn't be influenced by what the West thinks that the development must look like. For instance, is having a laptop in each family more critical, or is having a toilet in each house more critical? Should maximum people have smartphones, or should maximum people have food on the table? Our narrative around development in developing Asia should be the narrative that works for us in Asia, not narrative that is prescribed by a Western academic. Number 3, we should know our own country and our neighboring countries very well. What are the challenges? What are the strengths of our neighboring countries, so that we can draw up trade agreements, we can draw up mutually beneficial commercial relationships accordingly. We must focus on Asia's management model. While I was researching for future Fluent Asian Leader study, I found a data set that highlighted that up till 1820, China and India were the biggest economies for hundreds of years. It's only in the last 200 years that the West has led the global economic growth. Now, the jury is out, and it's up to you to think whether those 1820 years were an aberration, or are the last 200 years an aberration. If we feel that we were doing something right in Asia to build compelling businesses for hundreds of years, we may want to go back and look at those management models. We don't need to adopt those, but there are best practices we can pick up from those management models if we want to position our organizations to be successful in the Asian context. And finally, stay away from what we call used futures. Used futures are ideas, behaviors, practices that we continue to deploy despite the fact that they are no more relevant at this point. So ideas like nationalization, ideas like protectionism, These are ideas that are used futures. So adopt those ideas with a little bit of caution, I would say, if you are an organization or a country that is moving in that direction. Change the slide, please. The fourth mindset change is around experiences, around how we get our teams ready for the new word, to be future fluent or future ready. Business as usual experience will not make you as a board director, your management team, or the C-suite executives ready for the future. If you're thinking about future fluency, think about diversity of experiences. Diverse teams, push your CEO, push your C-suite, push your senior executives, your hypers to get diverse experience and in diverse teams under their belt, because diverse teams are known to be much more innovative as compared to teams that look very similar. In diverse industries, because best practices often come from outside your own industry. In diverse societies, so push your leaders to go and experience a few years, let's say in a developing, rich, poor, urban, rural society, and so on. Not only to understand the vulnerabilities at the bottom of the pyramid, but also underlying opportunities therein. Also push your leaders to take a rotation outside of your home country, uh, in a developed nation and also a developing nation, to be comfortable with discomfort, to be able to operate in multiple cultures, and so on. So that's the fourth mindset shift. The fifth one on the next slide, please change the slide. The fifth is the most critical one, I would say, and most apt at this point as the situation plays out. And this is about development. This is about how you develop your leaders to be ready for the future, to deal with uncertainties like this one that we are living through. Most organizations, I would say 95% of the organizations think about development as horizontal development. And let me explain what I mean by that. That you have a leader, you keep teaching, as the leader goes up in hierarchy, you keep teaching him or her newer skills. And at some point, the leader is unable to absorb more skills because his mind is full of those skills that he's been taught over the years. And you write off that leader saying that, hey, he's reached his level of incompetence, let's get him out and get a new guy in. That is horizontal development. That is akin to the picture on the left-hand side on the slide, which is a glass being filled with water. Once the glass is full of water, you just change the glass. Whereas vertical development is about growing the size of the glass itself, or helping the leaders get sophistication in their thinking, sophistication in their mindsets, sophistication in their brains to deal with increasingly complex and critical situations. At CCL, we are working with a bunch of organizations in Asia, the biggest brands in Asia, to build vertical leadership capability in their CEOs and in their C-suite. There are three conditions that need to be met to be developed vertically. Number one, the leader needs to go through heat experiences or crucible roles. And the one that we are having at this point, dealing with the COVID situation, is as crucible as it gets. So leaders who are able to pull the organizations through this experience will be able to think more in a more sophisticated manner post this experience. Leading a tough team, dealing with a tough boss, leading an M&A situation, a global rollout in technology, or reporting into a mean boss, they're all heat experiences. The second condition is around colliding perspectives. The leaders must be able to look at the same situation from two angles. They should be able to see the polarity in the situation. And the third condition is elevated sense making. How do you make sense of polarities? How do you make sense of the heat experiences? This happens through mentoring, through reverse mentoring, through coaching, and so on and so forth. This is a topic very close to my heart, and we at CCL are doing a fair amount of work. Happy to have a longer dialogue around this if your organization is keen. Turn to the next slide, and very quickly, I'll talk about 5 capabilities. So the 5 capabilities, and we are calling these capabilities COVID combat capabilities. These are capabilities you must have as board leaders or C-suite executives. You must push your next in lines to have these capabilities, and you must encourage the entire organization to work in the direction of building these capabilities. Turn the slide and I'll show you what these 5 capabilities are. Number one is empathy. Being compassionate to our employees, compassionate to our vendors, suppliers, clients at this point when they need emotional support, to be able to step into their shoes and understand their point of view. Now, we Asian executives are better positioned in terms of empathy because it is a part of our culture, across the region, if you will. So we are better positioned on this, and we are lucky to have that capability in our DNA. The second is around trust. Trusting your employees as they work from home that they are giving their best, trusting your vendors, your suppliers, and being trustworthy with your clients. And that's a story I shared with you that the board director and the CEO was doing when they were calling up organizations to check if they could help them in any way, just to gain that trust and to show compassion. The third capability is around agility. And while you need to go slow initially, you need to understand the situation and then act. Once you start acting, you need to be agile. You need to change those tactics on the fly to make the most out of the situation that you are dealing with. Number 4 and 5 are extremely critical if you're a C-suite leader or a board leader. Number 4 is around growth mindset. Growth mindset is having the capability and the resilience to unlearn old skills and learn new skills irrespective of your level. Even if you're a board leader, a CEO, a CHRO, a business leader, and so on. Being open to learning new skills and having the resilience to do so is a growth mindset. And finally, multidimensional thinking, extremely critical if you're a senior leader, especially if you're a board leader. The decisions that the organizations will be taking at this point, you need to look at those decisions with a multidimensional hat. From the point of view of minority shareholder, majority shareholder, regulator, the compliance agencies, the key stakeholders, the employees, the partners, and so on. So multidimensional thinking is to be able to look at the same situation with different lenses and acting accordingly. These are the 5 critical skills that we must have as board leaders, we must have as C-suite executives. We must push our next in lines to have these capabilities if we want to sort of be successful in the longer term. Turn the slide and I'll close the seminar and then invite some questions. So, before I invite questions and before one of my colleagues from ICDM comes in, the jury is out whether it is a 3-month journey to post-COVID or to the second set, or whether it is a 6-month journey, depending on where you are on that scale of optimism. However, we will get past this situation. We must realize that. When the turnaround happens, and it may be a V-turn or a U-shaped turn, the jury is out on that as well. We must be ready to make the most of that situation. If you're able to deal with the paradoxes I highlighted, if you're able to tweak your mindsets a little bit to take your organizations further, and if you're able to inculcate the capabilities that I highlighted, we will win the second set against COVID. The world will win. And you leaders will be responsible for this victory. We must win at all costs, and the onus is collectively on all of us. Thank you, and let me invite some questions and comments.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had a bit of technical difficulty on my end. That's the main thing, isn't it, Surya? We have to all get used to doing all of this in front of a screen and essentially talking to nobody in a way, right? Nobody who's there. But anyways, thank you so much for all your insights. And I completely agree with you, the fact that it is the uncertainty that is keeping us all awake more than anything else. Because how can you plan for something that has almost never happened, or most of the leaders now probably have never gone through, right? There's no enemy, there's no sort of finger that you can point, although some leaders have tried. So I think that is the main thing that is, dealing with all of us. And we've got some questions here, definitely. This is from Nur Leila Barudin, who's the MD for WPP. And they ask, how do you as a leader encourage collaboration amongst teams to continue during homebound, as they used to collaborate before the COVID crisis? People now are getting used to working in their own home environment and can do so with less interaction. But in a way, I think less interaction is a blessing and a curse. On one hand, you're not as distracted. On the other hand, it is very lonely to just work in a silo, right?
It is, and that's a great question, and thanks for asking that question, because that is the number one question that is asked of us when we share some of these findings. It's hard. It's not easy to develop a collaborative mindset if people are working from home for an extended period of time. But it's not easy, but it's not impossible, I would say. There are collaboration platforms at this point, and if you're a large organization, which I'm guessing you are, you will be using some top of the line technology in terms of collaborating workflows. That is the easy part. The hard part is creating collaborative relationships in your leaders and your
Right.
teams. Once in a while, it is a good practice to just come online and who knows, enjoy a cup of coffee with each other, where you don't talk business. You just ask each other, hey, what's happening at your home front? How are you spending time? And let's enjoy a cup of coffee. Um, I was speaking with an executive who shared that, this executive and their organization, an ad agency, a global ad agency, they used to have Friday drinks, post work hours. And they said that we continue to do that post working from home. We just log in and get a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and we discuss, things that are happening around them in their life. Also, we may be surprised at how strong the relationships may get at this point. Because think about it. Earlier, I used to, my team sits in Singapore, and I split my time between Singapore and India.
Correct.
While I travel across the region. And I'm quite used to, working with my team online. And think about it. Earlier, it used to be only work. But now, people are not shy, in my team at least. When their kids walk in, we say hello. When their spouse walks in, we say hello to them. I've seen their pets, I've seen their dogs, I've seen
Yes.
different bedrooms, because they want to work in different rooms and so on. The
Right.
collaborative connect in my team has gone to the next level. And if we are ingenious around these things, it is not as hard as it seems.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. My cat has made a appearance on one of these as well, so I can
There you
completely
go.
understand. There is this question from Noniradzi. It's quite interesting, saying that a lot of the main suppliers that they have is from Europe, and they've sent a lot of termination letters citing force majeure. How do you, as a leader, sort of ensure that supply chain remains agile? When you're trying to put out millions of fires, how do you ensure that the supply chain doesn't snap eventually if you are a leader?
That's a tough one. And
Mm,
I'm not sure if I have an answer to that, but I would say that, resilience counts at this point. If
okay.
you're talking in leadership parlance, I would say resilience counts. How many blows can you take at this point and still stand as a leader, as an organization, will define how successful you are. And what you are saying is a real situation. I spend a lot of time speaking with CEOs, C-suite, and the board leaders. These are the kind of questions people are asking. Yes, everything is fine. We need to be compassionate, but what when my top line is getting hit by a few $1 million in the next few weeks because our partners are not able to honor the contracts? And my take to them is that, hey, I wish I had an easier answer, but make sure that you are drawing the right balance between compassion and control.
Mm,
Yes, we need to be compassionate. We need to understand their situation. We may need to give them some room to play around with the flexibility, but also we need to be firm, because jobs in our own organizations, our own top line is at risk. So my advice would be at this point to try and draw the right balance between compassion and pushback and control. I wish I had a better answer for you, but this is a situation that we are all dealing with at this point.
Actually, there's actually another question. A couple of anonymous attendees have actually dropped this, and I do agree. You mentioned a lot about empathy and the fact that because we're Asian, because we are not probably like the West, where here, take a pink slip and go. It's almost unheard of. Not that it's not almost unheard of, but it is very hard to let people go. And while somebody's asked, well, empathy is good, capital preservation is the key for survival. How do you, the person says empathy can't replace survival. So how do you find that balance? How do you find that balance between knowing that uh, if you are too empathetic, there'll be no organization maybe to go back to?
You're right. And that's the reason I said that, don't be empathetic at all costs. I would say draw the right balance between empathy and being practical, or being in the self-survival mode, if you will. Well, it's a
Mm,
reality. All of us, all of our organizations, your organization, my organization, at some point, if this extends for too long, we will be looking at headcount reduction. And I am in enough and more number of conversations with the C-suite who's discussing this already. So it's a
mm,
reality that we all need to take the hard stand at some point. Um, by being empathetic, I do not mean that, hey, we burn a hole in our pocket by taking loans and paying salaries. By empathetic, I mean that being respectful of people and making sure even if you are letting people go, you let them go as friends. You help them out with finding jobs. You don't start with cutting roles straight away. You send people on furloughs, on 5 paid or on 5 weeks, 6 weeks, or 2 month unpaid leaves, or maybe 6 month unpaid leave. You know, so by being empathetic, I don't mean putting our own survival in jeopardy. What I mean is exploring all options and helping the person understand that, hey, I have explored all the options before taking this step, and now we are at a situation that we cannot pay your salaries, otherwise we won't survive. So as
Mm.
long as we achieve that, even if we take some jobs away, even if we ask people to go, we are being empathetic enough. So empathy with the practical hat, not empathy with a hat which is not practical, or is burning a hole in your pocket, I would say.
All right, so talking about things like maybe not just salary reduction, but putting people on selective leave or furloughs. Somebody here asked a question: how about training people in the new norm? Air Asia just announced here that they actually have a restaurant called Santan, and they are actually going to train some of their people to help with deliveries. So they are helping certain pockets. Should firms invest in this area of training people in the new normal? Is that considered fat or is that considered muscle?
That's 100% muscle, I would say. So if you can repurpose people, because these are people who are with you, these are people who have an emotional connect with the organization. If you help people once through this hard times, they will remember it forever. There'll be
Mm.
incremental loyalty, incremental engagement, because this thing will end. This mess will end in 3, 6, 9 months. But if you're able to gain the compassion, the trust of the people, they will stand by you in difficult times. So retraining 100% is building your muscle. So if you're a sports person, for instance, and you're not able to go out and play hockey or play cricket or play badminton at this point, you are training at home, maybe not playing with the racket, but you are building your muscle at this point. You are building your strength and your ability at this point. Any kind
Correct.
of repurposing that you can do with your employees will help you. It's extremely critical for industries that are hit the hardest, tourism, airlines industry, and so on. So absolutely a muscle, I would say.
Okay, so then there's this other question from Jennifer Teen, who's the executive consultant at Grit and Pace, talking about, because we mentioned a lot about looking east, right? And the examples that can do that. She says, can we really afford to limit our perspective at this point? Or will the crisis force us to rethink what global is, or at least be global minded, even if your scope of your business is regional or local? Are we allowed to sort of limit our views now?
Yeah, so it's critical to get the right balance there. It's critical to, what has happened. I've grown up in a bunch of countries. I've grown up in Singapore, I've grown up in India, I've lived in the US for a while. The tendency is that a practice that is coming from the West is inherently superior. uh,
Hmm.
that has been challenged and tested in the last couple of years. I've seen that being challenged and tested in some organizations more than the others. You know, uh, what the message that I want to sort of leave this group with is that get the right balance. Don't just look at the West. Don't look at the developed West, I would say, and copy the practices. If your situation and your challenge is something that may not be playing out in a developed economy, look at the developing countries for experiences. Fintech, for instance, if you're a fintech company, there are enough and more examples of what's happening in Indonesia, what's happening in India, what's happening in Bangladesh, what's happening in your own backyard in Malaysia around fintech innovations. you know
Mm-hmm.
if you are trying to build an industry which is relying heavily on the bottom of the pyramid, on middle class, lower middle class, and poor people, economically poor people, then you need to the practices coming from the West may not work. You need to draw the right balance. You can't close your eyes to either of the two. You need to start looking at practices from the East in addition to practices from the West as well.
Okay, so the ultimate message to take away is that nobody actually has the ultimate right solution, do they? There's no one right way to do things in a COVID-19 world. Is that what you're trying to say?
It is what works for your context the best. I'm currently in India, so I was, I came to India a few weeks ago, and now I'm stuck here for a few months, if not more. Uh, we have over 1 billion people. If we would have acted the way some of the countries in the West did around this time, we would be in deep trouble. So we
Mm.
decided to bring about the lockdown much before the developed West or even Singapore decided to bring about, and that was a
Okay.
smart thing to do. So we need to be careful about what works for our context. A strategy that works for a country which has 300 million people may not work for a country that has 350 uh, 1.35 billion people and so on. So
Mm.
if a strategy works well for a country that has deep regulations around environment, deep regulations around governance, that may not work in a country which does not have the maturity in the governance structure. So
Okay.
what works for your context, we need to look at examples around those.
All right. Raymond Madden, who's a professor with the Business School for International University of Malaya, Wales, has this question: how will, at this point in time, in your view, will a post-COVID world look like? Social interaction has been so much curtailed, but will we ever sort of recover and go back to the way we were, or in fact, should we even go back to the way we were?
So Raymond, thanks for the question. My guess is as good as yours at this point. Basis,
Mm.
and I can give you my guess. My guess is the truth will not be in this or that. The truth will be somewhere in the middle. We will go back to the social interaction, but it will be measured. You will see a lot of people sporting masks as they move around post the COVID world. We will travel
Mm.
to different countries, but who knows, maybe the visa requirements need you to be COVID certified. I mean, I don't know what that means. You've had a vaccine around COVID. uh, People will frequently travel, but who knows, people who are COVID resistance, who've had the COVID-19 disease or 19 illness, they've become resistant. Those are the ones who will be doing international movement and delivery for your organizations a lot more than the others. So I'm guessing the truth will be somewhere in the middle, but the world will be different. My take is that despite the fact that the public has short memory, despite the fact that the world has a lot of resilience, it will be different going forward. For instance, and one of the leaders highlighted that organizations and countries that have the animal instinct will do better than the others. For instance,
Mm.
post World War II, uh, people had written Japan off almost completely, but the country
Fair
came
enough.
back with
Yeah.
solid resilience. Similarly, with
Okay.
organizations, with people, with countries, there will be some changes, and some of these changes may surprise all of us here on the call today.
Okay. In that vein, that Olia is actually asking, do you think the job market now will see more niche professionals or multitaskers? Talking what we were talking about retraining, right? Retraining, repurposing, redeploying. Does this mean that the composite of what the post COVID-19 job market will look like, will we see more of that niche professionals or the multitaskers?
We will see, I would say that, you will see people who can wear multiple hats. And that's my guess. This is not based on any data, perhaps based on anecdotal evidence, that you will see the organization's the design will change. And you will see a small core of executives who are niche executives in the organization. And then you will see a set of multitaskers around them. A lot of these
Hmm.
multitaskers may not be sitting in your organization. They will be people in the gig economy. They will be people who will be sharing jobs with maybe your competitors and so on. So you will see one thing that has surprised me is, in a lot of those conversations with youngsters, now I see a lot of them who were earlier in gig economy, they are looking at full-time roles extremely favorably. So the
Hmm.
COVID situation may also test our assumption that we'll see more gig workers going down, or people going down the gig work path 10, 15, 20 years down. But in terms of organization structures, I would, my guess would be that there'll be a small core of specialists, and surrounded by a huge population, or a largish population of people who can wear multiple hats.
Okay. Francis asks, so as leaders, talking about leadership in particular, how frequent do you think organization-wide employee engagement for Culture Connect is deemed good practice? We've had a couple of other speakers who say they do it once a week. There's a coffee session where you can talk to the top boss and see how it is. But how often do you think leaders should actually engage? Because I think if you did it every day, then people would be a bit suspect.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the organization, I would say. If your organization is used to, for instance, if you were a large technology company where people are used to working remotely from the client side, they are used to working remotely from home, then perhaps things don't change a whole lot. So you don't need to invest a lot in terms of engagement initiatives. If you are the biggest IT company where a lot of people work offsite anyways,
Hmm.
if you were an organization which was deeply knit and a lot of people would normally not travel, then I would say you need to do it more frequently. So it depends on the organization. I don't think, or in my view, there isn't a set formula for this. For some organization, there may be an ongoing initiative. Who knows? Uh, there's this organization that I was speaking with the other day. They've started an online gaming system. So,
Right.
because people are working from home, 1 hour, they've slotted 1 hour for their team of about 34 executives in Asia, and they would log on to a gaming platform and game for 1 hour. Just to make people have that connect with each other and do something fun together. So this organization is doing every day. Whereas one of the other organization, I would say the largest technology company, you can guess the name if you try hard. Uh, the largest technology company, they said the world doesn't change for us because anyways, most of my staff was traveling and was at client side. Now they're not at client side, they are sitting in their homes. So they're not doing a lot of initiatives around people engagement. So there's no magic bullet around this or silver bullet around this. It is what works for your organization. It is how emotionally connected your people are to the brand or the organization that they work for.
Okay, just one last question to sort of wrap this all up, and I think this is actually quite pertinent, is by Celia, is that once we, and we will, we're being positive here, we will win the third set, we have to win at all costs. What are the key things we should document and learn to prepare us the next time something like this comes along? I mean, because we've had SARS, we've had H1N1, but what do we take forward with us?
That's a beautiful question. And thanks for asking that question, because the worst thing that can happen out of all this when we are in that second set or third set is that we don't learn anything from this. And when I was interviewing for the research paper that I'm writing on post-COVID world, and I'll share that with the community here, uh, organizations, and I mentioned it during my presentation, organizations that had been hit by SARS, even they were not prepared for a pandemic. They
Hmm.
should have been prepared. So clearly they did not take anything away from their earlier experience. What you should be documenting is the response process. What you should be documenting is the policy shifts that are happening at this point. What you should be documenting is the load on your technology infrastructure at this point and make that a normal going forward. What you should be documenting is the initiatives that are being run to cut costs. What you should be documenting is the reaction that HR is having around people policies at this point. So I would say if you are an HR executive at this point, or if you're a senior executive, you should be spending a lot of time making sure that all of this is not lost from the organizational memory. Because God forbid if something like this happens again, and it will
Hmm.
after a few years, we should be better prepared to deal with all of this. Now, think about some of the countries that have dealt best with this. Think about the Hong Kong example. Think about the Singapore example. And some other countries in Asia that have dealt better than this are countries that took something away from the SARS experience. And we need to do that at an organizational level.
Okay, thank you so much for all your insight today, Sunil. I found it very eye-opening and enlightening for sure. And with that, we come to the end of our webinar for today. Thank you again. Thank you so much for all your participation and questions. I am sorry we couldn't get through all the questions that our attendees actually put forward, but it's so much appreciated, all your interaction. But of course, feel free to go through the chat box. We've actually had quite a number of discussions there, so maybe there's something you might pick up. Also, as always, we'd love to hear from you. Please use the survey link in the chat box or scan the QR code to provide your feedback and topics of interest. Also coming soon to this space, the online program series from ICDM. If you want to be the first to hear about it, you can email development@icdm.com.my or visit icdm.com.my. Thank you so much, Suna, for all your insights this afternoon. There'll be another webinar series tomorrow at the same time, same place. Speaker then is Sunny Koo, who's the managing consultant and founder for Human Synergy Malaysia. Thank you so much all for joining again. I know I've said that a lot, but it cannot be oversaid how much we've enjoyed all the participation. And with that, everybody keep safe, and keep your loved ones safe as well. See you out.
Thank you. Bye-bye.